Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, 7:08 p.m. Central, and this is year 15 of doing this. My God, getting old. Jay will be here in a minute. He was here, and he vanished, so hopefully no internet crap. We got Mark Muncy here with us tonight, and he wrote Eerie Appalachia, and let's see the full title. I have it right here.
Oh, yeah, they throw in all the things on it.
Yeah, and you write those with Kari Schultz?
Yep, my lovely wife. She's the talented illustrator. Brings all those monsters, myths, and legends. With it, they only pose for blurry photos, so they're all such divas. So she brings them to life. She's like the forensic pathologist, sketch artist for monsters, myths, and legends.
Nice. Eerie Appalachia, Smiling Man, Indrid, the Jersey Devil, and the Legend of Mothman. So basically, just to give you some background on the show, the reason we do it is, like I said earlier, when I was 17, I had testicular cancer, and went through all that fun and chemo and stuff, and I was healed from it and everything. Lost one in the war, and then a year or so later, my dad passed away. And I started to have really strange experiences of UFOs over every house I lived at. I saw different types of beings, from beings of light with my physical eyes. I saw two beings of light leave my house. Saw some little hooded beings in the woods standing around a black box that were really weird. And a black cat jumped towards them and they vanished. And a friend saw that with me. And there's been some other weird things. But basically, it led to doing this show. And we've been around for a while, and we've had a lot of people on about UFOs. A lot of the greats like Jim Marrs, Stanton Friedman, a lot of them are gone now. But we've been around older than I look. 48. I'm feeling it, that's for sure. But we do everything. I love cryptids. I love it all. But it's great to have you here. I guess my first question is, what got you started on this path of all this weirdness? What was the catalyst?
Well, the catalyst is we go back to me growing up in back hills of West Virginia, Kentucky, and Ohio. And we lived right at that little cross section there where, the three states combine. And while I was younger, we used to go, family had a family farm there in Louisa, Kentucky, which is now near Yatesville Lake, and was on the old Blaine Creek that went into the Big Sandy River. All this stuff is, anyway, that's the area. And we would go there on weekends and camp out and have, just away from the city. We lived in Charleston, West Virginia, and this was our, we drive down there and rough it for the weekend, but wasn't really roughing it. We had Airstream trailer and all this stuff. But I stayed down in this area that was an old baseball field that was long abandoned. So it was all woods all around us, but then this clearing area. And I would go down there to stargaze because I was a nerd. It was the 70s. And, and it was like, hey, let's look for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Let's look for Star Wars. And it was dark sky territory. So it was beautiful stars, beautiful skies. And we would go there and tell ghost stories. I'd bring my friends from the city. We'd just have a nice weekend there. And at one point, we would tell stories. There's a local monster in that area, a holler monster, as I like to call it. Just one of those urban legend stories of about a monster that lived there. And it sounded like something out of South Park. It's called the Bench Leg of Goble Ridge. It had a wooden leg. It had the head of a man. Had the body of a cow or a big cat, and it would jump from tree to tree, and it would, and it's with its wooden leg, it would knock you off your horse if you were a bad person. So my dad called it its whoop ass stick, So anyway, dumb story. I never paid much mind to it, except that my father told it, my uncle told it, my aunts told it. Everybody told this story, and everybody seemed to have an encounter with it. But nobody could, but it didn't make sense to me. This wasn't an alien. This wasn't a Bigfoot. This wasn't Nessie. In Search Of was big then. I knew monsters. But down there one day I was out looking for ghosts and monsters, just kind of seeing what I could find. And really, I just went out looking for stars and wanted to see if I could spot an alien. And as I was out there walking late one night, see one of the horses come by that was on the property, and something spooked it, and then I hear more hoofbeats and another horse runs by, and I'm like, all right, that's the two horses on the land. Something's got them riled up. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if it's a bear, because there are bears there. And then I realized all I've got with me is this little Red Ryder BB gun, basically. And I'm like, oh, that's not going to do me much good if a bear comes by. And then I saw something unusual. Could have been my bench leg. It was this strange thing that was kind of glowing, looked like kind of a big cat, but with a strange head. And I remember looking for a wooden leg, but didn't see it. But it ran past me and scared the bejesus out of me. And I didn't know what it was, didn't understand it. Ran home up to the big trailer and told my father, and he's like, oh yeah, you saw the bench leg. And I'm like, oh, I guess I got a story to add to things. So that's what started it all. After that, it was infatuation. There was no stopping me. I read every book I can on it. And
so what did it look like to you when you saw it?
Like I said, it looked like a big cat. It looked like a panther, but with kind of a glow around its head. And its head was definitely some sort of misshapen, no fur on it. And it was ugly. It looked inhuman, and not like an animal. It looked like a deformed creature of some sort. And there's 100+ years of seeing this thing. So, and I was just one more story on the campfire.
And the glowing head. That makes it even more strange.
Now,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, but now, doing research on the new book and, realizing that that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's hundreds of these little stories everywhere. The one that got me on this was we found a story of a peddler who had been killed in our area in the late 1700s, early days of Kentucky. And he had been murdered by bandits. And cover their crime, they killed his cow that was pulling or ox that was pulling his cart, and he had apparently fought back with a stick, and they threw it all in the same grave. So if some sort of spirit of vengeance was going to come out of it, of course it's going to look like a cow mixed with a human head and a wooden leg. And suddenly that story makes a little more sense, but it's definitely weird.
I had Bruce Hallenbeck on. He wrote a book for Small Town Monsters, a Kinderfeld creature. And in it, they talk about the blob. Like they saw some blob up there. It's near Hudson Valley and all that. But something interesting, some people saw this blob going down the road, but another guy saw the Virgin Mary. Like different people were seeing different things based on their belief system. That gets pretty weird. You see like a Steve McQueen blob, or another guy sees the Virgin Mary. That definitely gets weird, and how that trickster element, messes with your perception and feeds off your beliefs. That's always fascinating as well, with different things like this. So with a lot of it, do you think it's paranormal or just weird cryptids, or a little bit of everything?
I don't like using the word, supernatural. I even don't really like paranormal too much. I like preternatural. Stuff we don't understand yet, but someday we might. That was Shirley Jackson's term for it from Old Haunting of Hill House, and I love that because it's people have seen stuff they don't understand. People are trying to make sense of it, and it is stuff, the preternatural of one generation becomes the natural of the next. Like, we look at things like, chiropractic medicine for, generations, and still to this day some medical schools are like, this is not real medicine, this is fake, this is voodoo, but yet people get real relief from it. So who are we to say it's not good? Acupuncture is coming back in a big way. Same thing. It was one of those, we called that witchcraft and hoodoo, and now it actually is helping people. So maybe we should do that. And and that's the same stuff. I think UFOs, I did not think we would ever have congressional hearings on UFOs again in my lifetime after Project Blue Book closed, decades ago. And now here we are. Are we on the verge of figuring things out? No, I still think we're a generation away. but I like the fact that we are making progress towards this stuff. So
Yeah, it's definitely got crazy with everything. And then when you've had these experiences, you just it gets a lot weirder just seeing. I can go through YouTube and pull up UFOs, CNN or UFOs, Fox or whatever, and just watch their reactions to it and stuff. And that's always amusing, especially the Fox ones. But they all are. They're all kind of insulting a lot of times, giggling about it and stuff. And I'm someone that's had them parked over my house. I don't know if I've ever been taken, but sometimes I wonder maybe, but I don't know. But one of my favorite documentaries, I don't know if you ever saw, was Dan Aykroyd being interviewed about all that stuff. Dan Aykroyd, UFOs Unplugged, the actor, he's into that stuff. I'm not big on MUFON. I think he's still in that. But that's a great one. But yeah, things have definitely heated up. And then now you got balloons and things being shot over Alaska. Like hopefully that was a foreign nation and not ET that they shot down. They're quarantining ET right now in a an interrogation room.
Oh yeah, this is like Roswell, where it was a weather balloon. We probably won't know for another generation what really happens, on these things. So there's always the initial story, then there's we have to re-explain it. We have to re-explain it again 10 years down the line. We'll see what happens.
So with some of these stories, like Small Town Monsters, is always fascinating how police and it gets crazy as hell with some of these stories. What are some of the ones that stand out where the reaction gets really crazy from people when this kind of sightings happen? And stuff
I mean, it all goes back to Hopkinsville. I think is probably the first that really everything kind of went crazy from, because that's a family that is literally terrorized in near Kelly, Kentucky, and 1950s, and they get attacked by these floating creatures with bug eyes and big ears and and a bulbed head. And the way they're described now, we would look at it as like what we would call a classic gray, but maybe wearing goggles or something. And they didn't have feet, but just little pods, and they would fly at them instead of walking at them. And they panicked, so they started shooting at them. And this was after seeing a meteor or some strange craft fly overhead, and the whole family is just terrified of these things. And so they're they literally have gunfire with them for hours, and they're not hurting it. They realize after a little while these things are impervious to bullets, and so they run and get the sheriff. What else are you going to do? You flee, you bring your family, you're trying to stay safe. The sheriff comes out there, they do investigations, they find tons of shell casings, no tracks. Well, these things were flying, no nothing. But it gets reported in the paper, and so suddenly they are flooded with people. People want to see what is the term saucer men or tub men, because they said the ship flew across like a wash tub. It looked like a wash tub. So now they've got dubbed as the tub men. And then at one point, one of the papers calls them little green men. That's where we get that term from, is this sighting. And then, it's weird because the place becomes swarmed with people. People want to see the aliens and where it happened and all that. And so they can't plant crops for a while because people just keep swarming them. So eventually the family finally charges $0.25 a piece to come see the site and everything and give tours. And then suddenly everybody's like, oh, they did it just for publicity. They did it just to make money. Well, their farm is destroyed. They had to do something, or they were going to, they were going to lose their land, lose their farm. Yeah. So yeah, are they making money? They got to eat, but this was not that. And so that's what I think all this goes back to, is if it wasn't for that blowing up, would we be talking about this stuff to this day? Roswell had disappeared, but came back right after that. And then all the stuff that it just explodes from there.
The goblins those goblins, what did they look like? Were they like grays, or just like they were on the roof, right? Like out of their ships on the roof, supposedly, right?
Yeah, some on the roof, some flying at them. They looked like what we would consider a gray alien, except for the fact it doesn't have the little three-toed feet. They just had little pods for feet. They said like little suction cups. The big eyes, but they may have been wearing goggles. And then the ears may have been antenna. This is definitely weird. And the fact that there were multiple ones, like, 5 or 6, possibly even a dozen, depending on the descriptions of who you listen to. There were 2 different families involved. It wasn't just one family. And they all swore to it on their deathbeds. And even the sheriff who investigated it swore to it and said, none of them had ever lied to him and none of them ever would. So, this is one of those, credible witnesses, all that. Yes, the families had been drinking that night. So, of course it's unusual, but, and it predates all the other, what we think of as, abduction sightings or near abductions or anything like that, close encounters at all. And of course, Blue Book investigates it years later, but anytime when a being was sighted or anything, they just immediately marked it as hoax and never really investigated it. So that's what that shows to me. So
there's Jay McNicholas was. He's having some computer trouble.
How you doing? Mercury retrograde.
That's over, I think. I thought it's finally ended.
Full moon just ended too. So
yeah. Then in that case, it was operational error. I don't know. It was working. I walked away. It was working. I came back. I sat down. Everything was.
It's the green comet. I just had the green comet that passed over.
That's it. Or it's that bit of the sun that just broke. So
I just had crazy stuff happen at the radio show site. I couldn't log in the other night, and then it wouldn't let me reset my password. It kept saying not in database, and this was WordPress and GoDaddy. And then I'm freaking out thinking it's been hacked or something. Then my internet goes out an hour later till morning. I'm like, man, they're really laying it on thick. But then I checked it in the morning, it's back up, and all that stuff had went down WordPress. I thought I got hacked and was freaking out. So, it's been one of those weeks for sure. But yeah, we're talking about the I can't even say it, Hopkinsville Goblins in Kentucky. And Appalachia is from what I'm seeing, West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio. It's just where the mountains run, pretty much, right? That's what states.
Yeah, they go all the way. They go all the way from Quebec down to Alabama, actually, and so we hit the whole trail. We talked a couple stories in Quebec. We talked some stories in upstate New York, and then all the way down to Alabama, and we hit everything from ghosts, monsters, legends, UFOs, everything we could, and there's just so much. And we had done 3 books about Florida, and when I published sent this to my publisher, they were like, why are we doing this? And I said, well, I was researching a Florida story, and it tied back into a bit of Mothman lore, and so I have to write about Mothman in my Florida book. And then there was another bit in the Florida book that was going to tie into the Flatwoods monster. And I'm like, okay, so I got to write about Flatwoods for this story to make sense. And then there was another story that tied in, and they were like, all right, Mark, fine, just write that book, and then you can write your next Florida book. So I was like, okay, good. That's what we'll do. So
I know it's always interesting when people have these experiences and then you start researching it. There was one time I saw some beings, and I had been in my younger days partying in different ways. And basically we were at this lake, and it was Halloween night. And some people were under the influence, I know for sure. But I saw on the lake like a humanoid kind of serpent-like being and like a hydra. And the closest thing I've seen to it is like Mayan gods. Like I have these wood glyph cards, like Oracle, and it has the gods on it. I was like, that kind of looks like the weird thing I saw. But what was weird, some other people that night noticed some weird stuff later. But later I came across some encounter stories describing this same being, and they said it was like it had antennas on its head. And there was different parts in the South where people had supposedly seen this thing. So it's just when it gets creepy when you start backtracking on some of this stuff. and it comes up in other places and stuff. What were you saying about Flatwoods in Florida? There's a connection with that here too, or something?
There is. Flatwoods, the connection with that was Tampa, has a great military base there called MacDill Air Force Base. And on the day of the Flatwoods encounter, there was a crash there from a training mission, quote, training mission. Now, what had happened is two pilots had flown from Pensacola up in the Panhandle to MacDill for a training operation. That was a training operation. They land at MacDill, they refuel, and while they're refueling, they get a scramble alert. The whole base goes on alert, and they take back off, and then they crash. And they were told their family was told they crashed somewhere over the Gulf. We're unable to recover their bodies. Sorry for your loss. It was a training accident. The report from that day at MacDill is completely redacted. It is all black. When you pull that report with Freedom of Information Act, that whole day, flight logs, everything, except for the scramble alert. Now, what happens is, though, if you go a little further south, down towards Port Charlotte Harbor, there's a Navy base there, and their reports weren't redacted, and they saw an unidentified craft flying over them, heading in a certain, in a direction. And if you take that line and you put it over Tampa, about an hour and a half later, okay, there we go. And then you keep going that line, it goes right over Flatwoods. So a few years later, they go back to the families. Now, this is like maybe a dozen years later. They go back to the family and say, oh, we found their bodies. They did crash up in the Panhandle area. Why were they in the Panhandle area if their training was Pensacola and back? So this scramble report suddenly makes it okay. They were sent up to look for something, might have entangled with it, and if they were to, let's say, any of those planes tag something and it continues on course, and it would crash maybe right over Flatwoods. And that day is the infamous Flatwoods encounter where, the strange craft crashes, family sees the thing, National Guard guy sees the thing. It's a probe. It has reptilian eyes hiding behind, in this thing. I know the classic drawing shows the arms reaching out and all that. That's nowhere in the original description. That was something a television crew drew to show the monster later. But the great Frank Facino, he's one of the experts on the Flatwoods monster, and he was one of the ones that pulled up that story and was like, Mark, you need to research this. And then I was the one digging for the family records, and we found those pilots, and they're now buried in Arcadia, Florida, at the Air Force graveyard there. So they're not even in MacDill. They're not at their family land. The bodies were supposedly lost, and then suddenly they found them in the Panhandle, but yet they're buried in Arcadia, which is, for combat vets. So it's a real interesting, lot of plot twists and everything. And we go into it in the book. So.
You ever come across the Fort Benning story that happened in Georgia? All the troops going kind of nutty and stuff, and seeing stuff and things like that. Things the books East of Eden. I used to be friends. Well, I guess I still am. He passed, but John Vasquez, and he was one of the guys there. He used to call me and tell me weird stories. Like he was still trying to figure stuff out. And he said he was on that base. And he told me a weird story. They think he got poked by a needle there and stuff. It was pretty weird, those phone calls, like the X-Files. But
oh yeah,
but he passed, unfortunately. But he'd been on my show. But in that Fort Benning case, supposedly the troops saw an alien. And it's almost like they were tripping out on psychedelics. I don't know if that's the case, or maybe it was a little bit of all the above. I don't know what happened, but it was definitely a weird story where the troops were freaking out.
The Fort Dix encounter was an oddball one, where the one sergeant comes out years later and announces that they shot down a craft, and then the aliens escaped, and they on the base, and they had to call the police to help them search for it, and then they had to redact the whole thing and had to tell everybody, don't tell anybody anything.
What state is that? Fort Dix.
Fort Dix is Jersey. but
Okay,
they took him
Jersey,
to
yeah, not far from
Yeah.
me.
yeah, and they took the creature Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, flew something out, grabbed it, and flew back once they killed it. And that's why the police were called in, because they thought they had shot a man, but they said it was a creature, and that's when Wright-Pat took it away. But all these guys were sworn to secrecy and all that stuff, but now they're all on their deathbeds, so they're all talking about it.
Wow, I'll have to look that up more for sure. It's interesting.
Yeah. And then the Mothman connection was actually what started the whole mess. Was I was looking into the Crestview sighting, which was a Miami sighting in the 60s, and it was a whole school gets buzzed basically, and the kids, hundreds of witnesses, kids, teachers, everything, they see this saucer with like a turret shape on top, and then it's surrounded by friends. It's got little Tic Tac craft that fly around with it. We would call them Tic Tacs now. Back then they just called them little cigars. And like I said, dozens of witnesses. But then the military come after they're all gone, and the military investigate and ask all the kids questions, ask the teachers questions. And one of the teachers says, oh, well, they hovered like helicopters. So the next day, the newspapers say, weird craft sighted over school were just helicopters. And it's all gone. And it disappears from papers. Nobody talks about it like Roswell. Nobody talks about anything until we now talk about, the Navy footage leaks. There's government, Congress is talking about it. And since I'm the weird Florida guy with my 3 Florida books, I start getting emails from these witnesses who are now in their 70s and 80s. And they're emailing me saying, hey, I knew it wasn't a helicopter. I knew it wasn't crazy. It's exactly like that thing on that video. And I get to interview these people and talk to these people. And I went down to talk to one, and he had the best evidence ever. He had his father's, address book / day planner type thing from the days. And, with everybody's phone numbers and everybody who called and everybody who visited, and Aunt Jenny's cornbread recipe, all this fun stuff written down. And he had that. We pulled up that day because it had the names of the government men who came to interrogate him as a kid. His dad wrote the names down, and I was all excited because I'm like, Freedom of Information Act. I'm going to be able to see if these guys have, if these are real people, and find out, what the real story is. Maybe they had a deathbed confession. Who knows? Maybe they're still around. Maybe if I'm lucky. Very unlikely. But one was a sergeant of the Air Force with like Smith as a name, so that was very useless. The next name was a Coast Guard, and it was a lieutenant, and it was a Lieutenant Sinclair. So I was like, oh, that's a good one. I was able to look him up. He was serving there at the Coast Guard base in Miami, but that was it. I didn't find any real information on him. Couldn't find family or anything. But the third name just said government man, and the last name was Cold. So for you doing this a while, that name should give you shivers.
Indrid Cold,
yes. And I asked him, can you describe this guy to me? And he says, well, he didn't really say much. He just stood there in a suit and just kind of smiled at me.
Yeah, that sounds like Indrid Cold, right?
That sure does. And that would have been just a few short years after the Derenberger incident. So was he working for the government? Is he a MIB now? This is suddenly I had to start researching Indrid and getting into that. And was he in Florida? Did he show up anywhere else? And then I told that guy, I'm like, this is valuable. This is like probably the most valuable thing for UFO researchers and conspiracy theorists. Please take good care of this. I was able to take photographs of it, but he doesn't want it published yet because he's a political figure in South Florida. So that's why I have to keep him, anonymous for now until he's out of office. Which may be soon because I don't know if he won the last election. But on the plus side, though, he knows he didn't know what I was talking about, why I had to explain why this is important. So he didn't even know who Indrid Cold was. But now he understands it, and he's got it in a safe location and all that. But crazy. And that's what started this whole mess for Appalachia was that.
Nice. Definitely, that's interesting for sure. And I don't know, I'm just kind of looking through some of the different cryptids. There's just so many different ones in here, and
Oh
I've
yeah,
enjoyed
that
the
was
book, but remembering is another situation. But there's so many I haven't heard of, like a rat man, a bunny
oh
man. Like
yeah, yeah, no, that
it's
was
weird.
the plus side was once I started doing this and I realized, we've got to do the major ones. That was, that was the publisher
Yeah,
insisted, we had to do Jersey Devil, we had to do Mothman and, and all that. But then I got to do the lesser known ones, but they were still kind of famous, Poplick and then we got to do Bunnyman Bridge and things like that. But then I thought about my monster. I was like, well, I got to put the bench leg in here. And then I
yeah,
also thought about, well, what if there's other holler monsters? So I started reaching out on all these forums and Facebook groups and everything and just said, hey, tell me your stories. I'd really like to share these. And then as I started interviewing families and stuff like that, I started realizing the Meemaws and Peepaws who were sharing these stories are dying off. And the next generation doesn't seem to care about these stories. And so then the whole purpose of the book kind of shifted, and instead of just being this catalog of folklore and monsters to I've got to preserve these stories. This is preserving folklore. This is, these stories are going to disappear in a generation or two if they're not written down. And
definitely.
and then the families would email me and say, hey, we've got one that I don't know if you're interested. And of course I'm interested. It sounds crazy. And the Rat Man was probably the only time I was actually in danger because I don't write about anything I haven't been to or any place I haven't gone. And I also don't go anywhere unless I've had at least two people tell me, a story about it because I want independent verification, of some sort. But this one was two different families wrote about it in the same area. And I was like, okay, well, I'll go down this holler. They all live in this one holler, and I'll be able to, I'll go visit the one family that I've been invited to go visit. And it was one of the times Carrie didn't come with me. She was busy taking care of our pets. She raises jumping spiders, and they can only go so many days without feeding. And I'm like, oh, I got this one. It's just an hour away from where we were staying at our cabin up there, and back on my family's land again. And I drove out, and it was just a nice day, and I drove into the holler, and I went to the house of the family, and I started talking with them, and then the neighbor comes across, and because that's what they do, they want to find out who's this crazy man that's in the holler that's not supposed to be here. It's kind of spying and stuff like that. That's always fun to see. And but as I was there, they started talking about the Rat Man to me, and the neighbor lady gets up and walks away, and I'm like, oh, okay. I wonder if I offended her or something. I was trying to just ask questions. And so then the other, lady is still telling me about, that they leave offerings for him, and you leave bottle caps out for him or trash out for him, and then things go okay. Your crops don't die, your animals don't run, and things like that. And then the other neighbor comes back, and she's got a shotgun, and I'm like, okay, time to go. So I obviously pushed the wrong button, and that was the first time I'd ever actually been, man, I don't even know if my wife knows where I am. And I'm usually very good about, I'm here. And we always go in groups. And, that's why I always tell everybody investigating these things, always go with a group or have somebody know exactly where you're going to be. And this was one of the first times that I said, well, I'll be off a road down here. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going, but it should be off of this road. So
what was she upset about? Talking about the Rat Man? She didn't want you talking about the Rat Man?
She didn't want anybody, she thinks that it's, didn't want anybody thinking they were crazy. And I'm like, oh, I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about the shotgun. But she also, but she was just very much like, some people worship him, and we don't want anybody thinking we're devil worshipers.
Kind of crap now.
Yeah, they didn't want anybody thinking they were devil worshipers or anything like that. So, just get on out of here. So I did. I got on out of there.
It reminds me of a Warhammer game, Vermintide, where you have to fight all these rat people. It's pretty good. Yeah.
Skaven,
That's it.
I'm an old gamer. I remember Blood Bowl, so I know that tied into Warhammer.
Vermintide 1 and 2. It's a Warhammer, but you have to kill a lot of rat people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so many different ones. I know Christina, my fiance, her Uncle Paul worked, and we both think he's a little creepy. He don't listen to the show, so we can say that. But he used to work at that Dozier place, and he'd tell us weird stories. And we're like, oh, we hope you weren't doing weird stuff there. Kind of vibe. But he told us a weird story about a UFO being in Silver Lake, which is a place I used to live on down here. It's just weird out of the blue kind of thing. And maybe he's crazy as hell. Maybe there's really a UFO in Silver Lake. I don't know. But he worked at that Dozier school, and I remember him talking about there's like a UFO under the Silver Lake. And it's just like this right-wing Trump dude and stuff, real country. And it came out of nowhere. It was just weird.
Yeah, but that Silver Lake UFO is not... That's not the first time I've heard that. So
really, you're familiar with Silver Lake up here?
I am familiar with Silver Lake.
I used to live on it. I had to move, unfortunately, and because of financial stuff. But I'm in Graceville now. But I used to walk those trails all around it with my dog Jack. He passed, which sucked. Been with me 16 years. But you know Silver Lake, and you've heard a UFO story too about that.
I've heard a UFO story up there, and that's funny that you mentioned that, because that was one of the ones that was going to be in that Florida book that I was doing all about UFOs, and that was because I'd done Eerie, Florida, which was all myths, monsters, legends, the major ones like Robert the Doll, Skunk Apes, Gulf Breeze UFOs, and then we got to do the sequel because that became a bestseller. They flipped out on us. Our publisher, hadn't had a bestseller. It wasn't written by a politician, so they flipped out, and then they had us do a sequel. And that was where we got to do off the beaten path, lesser known stuff. And we got to do Freaky Florida. And that was one of the ones where we got to do the Devil's Tree and some other things like that. But we did up near there, we did the Florida Caverns, where they supposedly found another Rip Van Winkle, where some guy woke up 100 years later and, when a cave collapsed. And it's just, fun little stories like that. But then our third book was Creepy Florida, which was all ghosts, because by that time they told us we need nothing but ghosts, just ghost stories. And that was, we were doing Ocheesy Pond, which is right up there, and we were talking about the wild man of Ocheesy Pond, and then we were doing Brooks Bridge, which has ghost wolves that run across the water there, and all this stuff. So we were hitting the panhandle pretty heavy for that one, and that's when somebody brought up the UFO in Silver Bridge, and I was like, well, I can't put it in this book, but that'll be awesome. And then that was what led to all the other UFO sightings, which will be in the next book, but next year. That was 2024, so still early days on that. But Silver Bridge is crazy story. Yeah
definitely. And Silver Bridge, the Mothman, but Silver Lake, interestingly enough, Stacy Brown came to that house and hung out with me from finding Bigfoot and all that.
Stacy's a good buddy.
Yeah, his dad had that. They had that footage that was pretty crazy, like almost like a caveman Bigfoot running through the woods. That was pretty nuts. That was a weird one.
That's still that, and Dave Shealy's skunk ape footage down in the Everglades are probably my two favorite Bigfoot videos. I know everybody talks Patterson Gimlin up Pacific Northwest, but I'm like, those two are unbelievable. So.
And
Patterson Gimlin, I like it because that's really the first one I saw in the movie theaters with Peter Graves narrating on this documentary about Bigfoot, and so I remember that really well. But there's one, and I'm not sure where it was taken, but it shows like a juvenile Bigfoot, like doing like gymnastic routine, like really tough gymnastic stuff in a tree, like on a hill in the distance, and it's just like no untrained human could do that. It was just amazing. I don't know if you've seen that footage, but I saw that and I was like, whoa.
I think that was Mississippi footage. I think that one was pretty big. There's another one where there's one that's like ripping tree bark and stuff, trying to get the bugs out of it, and it's very gorilla like. and that's another one in that same area where that other one was found. So
I haven't heard or seen that one, but the one with him doing the gymnastic stuff in the tree was amazing. I was like, wow, it's either a human, really tall teenager that knows how to do gymnastics in a monkey suit, or that's a legitimate monkey flipping around in a tree.
Yeah, Dave Shealy's footage, that 2007, where it's just running through the Everglades, and the fact that it is running in, 3 foot deep water, and that's up to its knees.
I've seen them run. They're fast.
Yeah, and it doesn't even slow it down at all. And I'm like, anybody in a suit out there would be tripping and falling and all that, and it's hot and it's the Everglades. It's terrible anyway. A braver man than anybody else on the planet for a hoax. No, not worth it. That's incredible footage. And the fact that it's minutes of footage, not just a 30-second clip, that is Dave sitting out there in his blind, filming it, which is great. And he opens the Skunk Ape headquarters a few years later because, it's what he's got. He lives in the swamp. Why not? Let's do this.
And I was going to say I had some pretty interesting UFO things on Silver Lake happen that were pretty weird. Quite a few.
That area is a hot spot.
Definitely fascinating. He came out there, and I was going to be in a documentary, and I did a great job. My first time on anything like that ever. I was nervous as crap, and something happened with the audio tech-wise, and they couldn't use it. So I was like, crap. But interestingly enough, he did want me to do something, another one about that Cheesy Wild Man story.
Oh yeah, that's a crazy story.
To it, but I don't even know if I want to do that kind of TV stuff. I don't like it. It makes my skin itch.
I did a documentary for Discovery Channel last year on Robert the Doll down in Key West. They brought me in as a talking head, and that was on Travel Channel and then Discovery Plus. But and that, and everybody's like, "Oh, you're on Discovery Channel. You must be rich now." I'm like, they gave me $300 and a weekend in Key West. You're not getting rich doing those, guys. So sorry to bust your bubble, but
the Silver Lake thing, I had these weird firefly UFOs in the sky, and I screamed for my brother and nephew, and they saw them, and it was like these energy kind of things. But interestingly enough, I was having trouble getting interviews when I first started doing this radio show, and I said a prayer, had that weird sighting, and then somehow ended up on a radio show talking about it. And then the next thing you know, I was getting interviews. I was on the phone with Stanton Friedman, like Nick Pope, like Nick Redfern, William Burke, like all these big people. It was almost like a weird, like aliens hooked me up or something so I could get interviews or something. That's what it felt like. And then another weird one, just real quick. It was like something was in the yard blowing the trees around. Like it was almost like an invisible drone or something, and you knew it was there, but the trees were blowing around to it, and something was flying around the yard, but you couldn't see anything. And me and my brother both saw that. That was really weird. But that Silver Lake's definitely fascinating, for sure. We're going to talk about Appalachia, and then we get into Florida, a little bit, dipping our toes. But you got anything you want to ask about from Appalachia, Jay?
I got a good Bigfoot question for you that I like to ask. I don't know if it's much of a specialty for you, but since you did speak about knowing the whole range of the Appalachians, I don't know where I saw it, but there were some studies that showed that they're very migratory. So they go from north to south, and most game that big you would think would leave tracks. So one of the theories of how they get through this area without being detected is through underground caverns that they've navigated from Florida all the way back up and down. Have you heard of that theory before? And what do you think about that idea?
I have heard that theory, and it is very plausible because, we have the whole Mammoth Cave system goes, the main entrance is in Kentucky, but we still don't know how big that is. Every weekend, they literally have guides in there trying to map it and mapping new sections. They get through a small section like this big. I don't know how they get through it. And then the next room is as big as a cathedral. And then they've mapped that. So literally miles are added to it every weekend. So any map you see of it is already out of date. Right. The minute you see it. And if you look at that, it's crazy. It is all up and down the Appalachians. And a lot of people don't realize the Appalachians are the oldest mountain range in the world. Everybody thinks the Andes, the Alps, and the Himalayas, those are the big ones, but that's because they're young. The Appalachians are the oldest, and before the countries split apart, it's the same range as the Scottish Highlands and Ireland's mountains. They're all the same mountain range, and they all have these tunnel systems and cave systems. That's why we do the mining there. It's where we can get all the stuff that we need out of the earth. So yes, these things could use that. They could use anything to migrate. I'm still of the opinion that they're not all of this, natural, world, that they are, that's why the tracks just stop. That I think some are, possibly an ape that we haven't discovered yet. Just like, we didn't discover silverback gorillas until, this century. People don't realize that. I'm like, yeah, they weren't around, late 1800s, early 1900s is when we discovered them, So I keep forgetting it's the 21st century now. So it's maybe previous century.
2 centuries ago.
Yeah, 2 centuries ago. Late 2 centuries ago. So not that long, but in the span of the world.
The span of our lives is not that long. Yeah.
Yeah. You try to explain to people that, the T-Rex is actually closer to the iPod than the T-Rex is closer to Triceratops. So, that's how long the spans are of these things. And Cleopatra is closer to us than she was to the time the pyramids were built. So, think about time spans. That's how things work. But that's the thing with Bigfoot or Sasquatch, or as Florida, since we can't have nice things, we always have to rename everything. So we call them skunk ape down here. But they're all the same, but they are different species. They are different types. And, the apple devils are different from the Minerva monster. The Minerva monster descriptions are different than old orange eyes. And they're, the shadow of red eye up in New Jersey. They all sound a little different. They all look a lot alike. They're all gorilla-ish, but also man-ish. So are they Neanderthals? Are they cave dwellers? We don't know. And it's one of those, but people see stuff and people describe it, and it changes their lives, and multiple witnesses sometimes, and multiple, multiple descriptions from independent witnesses that didn't even know. And that's why one of the things I like to stress is same with like preserving the folklore. Tell your mom, Meemaw, and Peepaw stories. If you have a Bigfoot sighting, or if you have a UFO sighting, or if your grandma talked about seeing one, or your uncle, or Crazy Harry that lived down the street saw a Bigfoot once, document it. Contact these organizations, the Bigfoot Research Organization, MUFON. As much as we hate them, there's still a good documentary database. All these other database organizations, write them down, so that way somebody 20 years from now swears they saw something and nobody believes them, but then they can go back and say, hey, wait, somebody else saw it on that same road on the same day, an hour later. Okay, I'm not crazy. And that helps so much. And that's, so if you see something, say something, right? That's what we do. So, and if nothing else, contact your favorite creepy author, and he'll be happy to document it for you. So.
Definitely. Jay saw a Bigfoot once in a window when he was younger. I've never seen one. I'd like to see one, but they seem to just show themselves to people.
And I saw the creature run away. They are very, very quick. I mean, you would think something that weighs almost 800 pounds couldn't move that fast. Yeah, they move pretty quick.
Yeah, anything can move fast when it needs to, and that's we try to explain that to everybody. It's like we come down here to Florida, everybody's like, oh, alligators can run 60 miles an hour. No, they can't go that fast, but they can go pretty damn fast when one's chasing you. But they're more likely to run away from you than towards you, and that's the same thing with Bigfoot. Everybody's like, oh, if they're so aggressive and all this, they'll kill us all. And it's like, that's the thing. They're like a deer. They'll run away from you, and and all that.
They intentionally avoid and evade. Absolutely, I have to agree with that. The encounter that we saw the next morning, because it was 10, 11 o'clock at night, and we were kids, we weren't allowed to go back out that late at night to go look for it. But the morning we went and we actually followed the tracks into the woods when we lost it into the creek. I know for a fact that's how it lost us. It got to that waterway, and who knows which way it went, but that's how it lost us, and that's intentional. That shows absolute intent and cunning.
Yeah, Bear wouldn't do that, or anything like that. So
Bear wouldn't care. Bear would keep going. He would go in the
Yep.
straightest line back to his house.
Yep. And that's the my favorite place to visit in Georgia is the Expedition Bigfoot. If you haven't been there, it's in Blue Ridge, Georgia. It is an active research center, but they have collected some amazing prints. They've got recreations of some of the incredible encounters. They've got a recreation of the whole Boggy Creek incident there that is pretty cool. But my favorite thing they have there is they have not only the footprints, but they have a Bigfoot butt print. So you can't go wrong with that. So
I'll have to look that up. That's in Georgia, Expedition Bigfoot.
Bigfoot. Definitely
worth in Georgia for 13 years. Where is it, up near Atlanta, or is it in the
It's Blue Ridge, so it's almost on the Tennessee border. Okay. Kind of the northeast corner of Georgia. Yeah, it's pretty it's a great place to stop. So
hey, did you ever see that UFO museum in was it Clearwater? Where the Clearwater sightings, or no, is that right? Gulf Breeze. Yeah, I know I drove by it a long time ago, but I think it was closed. I don't even know if it's still there. Have you
it's
seen
not
that
there
one?
anymore. It's up in Pensacola, near Gulf Breeze. Sadly, no longer with us. It was one of the many deaths of the pandemic, but I think it actually died before the pandemic. But that area is still like one of the number one hotspots for UFOs in the United States. But you've got Eglin Air Force Base, you've got Pensacola Naval Base, and the things that are seen there the most are actually USOs, the submerged objects. And a lot of them become UFOs. They come out of the water and all this. One of my favorite interviews with somebody was a boat captain out there. And he was talking about his depth finder went from 400 feet to 40 feet suddenly. And he's like, he thought a whale was coming up underneath him or something that unexpected. So he runs out up onto deck and he's, panicking because he's half asleep. And he looks down and he sees this big dark shape. He's like, it is a whale. And then it comes out of the water and it doesn't make a sound. And it's a perfect black triangle, classic description of the black triangle with maybe a dim light somewhere in the center as it raises out of the water, but it makes no sound. He barely hears the buzz of the surface, makes a low hum as it hovers above him, and he realizes it's like 100 feet in the air, and it's right over his boat, and it's bigger than his boat, and not making much noise, and then it just takes off into the sky super fast, again, hardly making a noise. And, I asked him, did you take pictures? And he's like, of course I did, but it was black on black. And he shows me photos. It's literally just a black screen. I always tell people, people are like, well, what do you do? I'm like, well, try taking a picture of your nightstand when you wake up that is right there next to you in the middle of the night with no flash. And you're just going to get a black screen. It's the same basic effect. And this was 100 feet in the air above him. But I also asked him, have you been drinking? He said, of course I've been drinking. I was on my boat. But but he's his arm hairs were standing on end as he's describing it. He definitely saw something he did not understand, and that was not the only. I've gotten dozens of reports of triangle craft up there, as well as other strange UFO incidents, and that's not too far from Silver Lake. So
yeah, I've had some triangle craft in Georgia that I saw some over some power lines, and a white ball came out of it. And I don't know if it was doing something to the power lines. Another time I saw some coming through an orange-green hole in the sky with my mother, and it scared her so much. She was like, Jeffrey, oh my God. She don't like to talk about it, but she remembers something happened kind of thing. And then the guy that I saw the pyramid craft over the power lines, I asked him about that years later. He don't remember it at all. And he was standing right next to me. Yep. Like, I remember it plain as day. That's one of those weird ones where you're like, well, did I get taken during that? Because I remember seeing it in a ball of light, but after that, I don't. So, I mean, I don't know, but it's definitely, I've seen the pyramids.
And that's what I hear a lot. Some people, see something with two other witnesses. And, one of my favorite stories was an encounter I had was at the Bellevue Biltmore back down in Florida way. We'll jump to Florida for a minute. The Bellevue Biltmore Hotel in Clearwater, They were about to bulldoze it. They weren't sure if they were going to be able to save it or anything. It was an ancient, one of the old big palace hotels down here, and the Henry Plant train went right to it, and that's how we tried to get tourists down here. And it was a very popular place for hundreds of years, or 100 years. And then and they were going to bulldoze it. And I was running a haunted attraction at the time that before I was doing the books, and I was thinking, if I can get some really creepy stuff from this place and use it, haunted stuff from this haunted building in our haunted house, how cool would that be? And I went the last day they were doing a big auction, and silly me, I thought I'd be able to get some stuff cheap, and no, everybody was spending a fortune. But it was also a lot of rich people there, and they were having a party, and everybody was dressed in period attire. So everybody was doing like Gatsby clothes and 1930s, and they had people dressed up as the bellhops. And I was like, oh man, they know, because there's a ghost here of a bellhop ghost. And while I was there, I noticed a group of people over there, and they were a paranormal team that I knew at the time. And I went up to them and I was like, oh, hey, Spirits of St. Pete, I know you guys. And they're like, yeah, we're trying to get here because it's the last day. We want to go up to the 3rd floor and see if the bellhop ghost is still there. Get one last chance at looking at it. And I'm like, well, let's go upstairs. Nobody's stopping us. The auction's boring. So we went up to the 3rd floor, and as we get off the elevator, there's a bellhop coming out of the hall and coming down the hall at us. And I was like, oh, wow, they had a guy in the costume up here. They knew somebody'd do this. And I was like, bravo, man, bravo. And he just kind of looked at us and walked by. And then I was like, that was great. And the guy next to me was like, yeah, that was perfect. And the girl on the end goes, who are you guys talking to? What are you talking about? She didn't see it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then they had infrared equipment. They had all these cameras. They had all this stuff they were going to set up down at the end. Nobody thought to turn it on. And by the time the guy was passed, he was gone. And I run back downstairs to see if he jumped down the stairs. He went down the elevator. I was trying to find that guy to say, hey, you got us. Nobody knew who we were talking about. None of the bellhops I bumped into looked anything like him, and none of them had been up to the 3rd floor. Wow. So, it just goes to show you. People say, well, I never saw a ghost. I'm like, I don't know what I saw, because that did not look like what you expect a ghost to look like. It looked like a guy, dressed as a bellhop walking down the hall. So
that's a good one for sure. Definitely creepy. So when it comes to Appalachia, what are some of the lesser known ones that maybe you want to talk about? Is there any that comes to mind?
Oh yeah, there's quite a few. One of my favorites, again, little lesser known, but still not unknown. I mentioned it earlier, was the Bunnyman Bridge. This is near Fairfax, Virginia, right on the Pennsylvania border. And there were several stories about it that I could find. One was a family had been killed there, a mother and her daughter, and they had been chopped to pieces outside this little tunnel area. And supposedly the man who killed them also skinned rabbits. And so that's why it was called Bunnyman Bridge. But then a few years later, we find that there was an escaped mental patient that from Penhurst Asylum, not too far away from there, had come down there, and he wore animal skins, lots of rabbit furs and rabbit pelts. And so, and then he would also string up animals all around the area. He lived in that area. So maybe that was the legend, because the urban legend was, don't go near this bridge on Halloween night, or bad stuff will happen to you. Bunnyman will get you. And then we go all the way to the 1970s, where a man in a bunny costume attacks a person with an axe there. And then 2 days later, the police come because they see him again. This time he's chopping at a house. And he runs away in the bunny suit, and they never catch him. It's an unsolved case. So
how do you not catch a dude running around in a bunny suit
bunny
with an
costume? He hopped away, I guess. I don't know. This is crazy. And so, the legends are these three things combined make the perfect urban legend. So there's a haunted house up there, a haunted attraction, that is called The Legend of Bunny Man. And that's their main character, is a guy in a bunny suit with an axe. And, again, you can see how the area has spawned this legend from 3 different stories that seem intertwined and really aren't, but are. So that's one of my favorites, for just because it is so 3 independent sightings that make the same thing. So
makes me think of the Donnie Darko bunny thing.
Yeah, exactly. Possibly an inspiration.
Definitely, for sure. Yeah. Anything else you got, Jay? And then I want to get into some other stuff for sure.
No, I'm good at the moment.
Okay. Well, okay. Is there any other lesser ones you can think of? We got Rat Man, we got Bunny Man. I like the lesser ones. I like them all. But
I love them all. But I love my holler monsters. There was one in New York, which was pretty cool. Upstate New York, up at the near the Adirondacks, but actually sold the Appalachians. They were this family inherits this property they've been there since the Revolutionary War, and they're surveying it to try to figure out who's going to get what. They're divvying it up amongst the grandkids or the great grandkids, and they find a barn on the property that wasn't marked on any of their maps. So they get near the barn and they start seeing some unusual signs, like on dead animals that are like desiccated. And they get a little closer to the barn and they open it up, and it is filled with cobwebs, like millions of cobwebs. And they describe as spiders as big as dogs and cats.
Wow.
And so being smart people, they decide to burn it with fire and just burn down the barn and not even go in there, right? Don't even want to know. So they burn it down. And then the next day or a couple days pass, they go back, and what they realize is there was a mine entrance underneath it. And so there's a cave down underneath. Talk about caves. So they start going into the cave, and there's more cobwebs and more spider, giant spiders. And again, this time they see a giant spider leg like come out. We're talking like Stephen King type thing here. And again, the brilliant family goes up, grabs alcohol, throws it down there, lights it on fire, problem solved. But what was amazing about it is a couple different families told me this story, and that area, there are no disrepaired barns. Barns are upkept there immaculately because of this legend. Don't let your barn fall into disrepair, or the devil spider is coming, or the giant cave spider will come and take over your land and eat your animals and stuff like that. So
I like it. I like it a lot.
Was it real? We don't know, but it's a cool story, and a couple families told it. So
definitely.
Yeah, the spiders are creepy, so yeah, that gets everybody.
What is Screaming Jenny at Moultrie, Alabama? What is that?
Oh, I love my ghost stories, and Jenny is like one of my favorite people of all time. We had written about the Greenbrier ghost, who was, the only ghost to testify at her own murder trial and solve her own crime. She's a folk hero of West Virginia. And as I was researching her, I heard this story about a screaming Jenny from Harper's Ferry. And so I reached out about that and, to general boards and stuff. And then this one lady messages me from Alabama, and she says, well, I don't know about screaming Jenny from Harper's Ferry, but my Aunt Jenny, they called her, she's known as Screaming Jenny, and she's a ghost. And I'm like, oh, do tell. I actually love it when it's an actual relative. And then she starts talking about Aunt Jenny, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's kind of a folk hero from Alabama. And sure enough, it's the same lady. And she happened to be a descendant of her. And so this lady, Louisa Jane, she was a young girl, half Cherokee. So she had blue eyes, but all the other Cherokee features. So people just said she was just drop dead gorgeous. And she marries a man named Willis Brooks, who's about 20 years older than her. And they have 9 kids. Gotta love that, right? And they're very much in love. They moved from Kentucky, where they first got married, to Alabama. And there they set up an inn right at this big crossroads right before the Mississippi River. And and they've got their homestead, their family's doing well, and the Civil War breaks out. Now, this area of Alabama is very much kind of trying to stay neutral ground, right? They think it's a rich man's war and a poor man's fight, right? It's, if you were rich enough, you didn't have to go to war. You could ignore the draft. You could send somebody else in your stead. If you owned 30 slaves, you didn't have to go. So, this is, the South in this area wasn't all in, right? And Willis Brooks, he was very much an anti-war guy. So, and it was well known. So the Confederate Guard in that area, which are basically the guys who are too old to fight or too young to fight, but still want to help, they're also the press gangs, making sure people are doing the draft. So they get out there and they're like, you got to come fight the war. And he's like, I'm too old. I can't go. All right, well, we'll take your son. Well, my oldest son's too young. Well, he's still coming with us. And then they're like, he's like, no, you're not taking him. So they decide to hang him. And as they're about to hang him, the oldest son grabs a gun. He's going to save his daddy. And then the Confederate Guard open up. They killed the boy, and then they killed the dad while the rest of the family watch. So poor Jane, Louisa Jane, sees that. And then they all leave. And then instead of just going into despair, she grabs all of her kids and takes them to the bodies of her son and her husband and makes them all put their hands in their wounds and makes them swear a Cherokee blood oath that they will not rest until all those men are destroyed. And then what she starts doing is these kids, she starts teaching them how to shoot, how to hunt, how to be badasses. And she starts hiring them out as gunmen, to other gangs. They take part in the Hatfields and McCoy feuds on both sides. A couple of their brothers are on different sides as gunmen. They join gangs out west. One of them becomes a famous marshal out there. And while they're hunting these men. And Aunt Jenny, as she goes by now, managed to get 2 of them herself. And then she remarries to another man. And while her kids are out doing the rest of the hunting, she has 10 more kids with the new family. Oh my gosh. God bless this woman. And she lives to be 98. And on her deathbed, she learns of one of her oldest son has finally died. He was the marshal, and he got gunned down in a fight where he took out 6 men, but was gunned down by like 20. But she was proud of him because he died with his boots on. And she's like, all my men, all my boys went out like men, so I can't complain. But she's on her deathbed, and she says to her priest, I'm done. I need to wash away my sins. Can you go grab my handmade soap dish over there, and I'll wash away my sins. I'm ready to die. And so he brings her the dish. She washes herself. He gives her the last rites, and she passes away. And as the priest is taking the soap dish away, he notices it's just really weird. And he realizes she'd made it out of the skull of one of the men she had killed. So, how badass is that? That's how I want to go out, right? But now her ghost is still seen along Alabama and along the Appalachian Trail, especially the southern end, where she's still looking for that last descendant because one got away. They only got 6, and one got away, and so her ghost is seen with those big blue eyes, and she screams like a banshee. So that's why she's screaming Jenny, and then people kind of do a reverse Robert the Doll thing with her, where Robert the Doll, everybody writes letters. I'm sorry, don't curse me anymore. With her, people go to her grave, which is way out this lone logging trail, middle of nowhere, where her old homestead used to be. And they go to her grave, and they leave tokens on her grave with notes of names that they want her to take out. You'll say, oh, he might be a descendant.
Wow.
You want to hire a ghost hitman, Screaming Jenny might be up your order. So,
but why the scream thing? You didn't mention anything about her screaming in life. Why
it doesn't make any sense. Like I said, it's more like she's a banshee, so it's just one of those that just seems to be her calling card. Is the ghost? You'll hear it scream, or you'll see her, and when you see her, she screams before she vanishes. But it's the blue eyes and all that. So it's one of those odd. Some people say it's a Cherokee battle cry. That's her yell is that. So from her Cherokee heritage. So
I know there's Bellamy Bridge up here. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, Bellamy Bridge is so haunted that it's actually on the park sign. The ghost story of it. So
we went there, me and Christina, and we couldn't figure out how to get to it. And another lady was deep in the wood and flooded. Maybe that's why. But this lady was like lost with her kids in the woods trying to find it, and it was just like, where the hell is it?
If you go down you park at that place, and there's a trail to it. But when the Ocklawaha River floods, that's the Ocklawaha River plain, and so you can't get through there when it's high.
And there was mosquitoes. You didn't want to stay out there.
No. I never go there between March and December. You can only go there January, February is the only time to go. And then if the water's high, you ain't getting in. But Bellamy Bridge is right up from Mariana, right up from the Dozier Skull. But when you go out to it, it is an interesting place. But what's funny about that ghost story, I don't think it really happened there, because the story they talk about is the bride who caught on fire and died there. That's actually a South Carolina story, but the person who wrote about it lived in Mariana, and so she wrote about it and called it the Bellamy Bridge. And so maybe the ghost transplanted, but there is some unusual activity there. It was the main crossing for the natives. It was the main crossing for the Spanish. There were some battles there, but the whole bride killed on her wedding day and burst into flames, that's not there. That's actually South Carolina. So,
well, looking through some of the ones in Florida, what's the gnomes of Bach Tower, Lake Wales? I just have seen gnomes in Florida. That's not something you hear about.
Not something you hear every day. And Bach Tower is definitely a unique place. So, Central Florida, you think of Disney and all that. This is about an hour south, near Lake Wales, which is a kind of a crazy town. They have a gravity hill there. So, it's called Spook Hill, where, you park at the bottom of the small hill right before a big hill, and you put your car in neutral, and it'll get pushed back up the little hill for some strange reason. But it's optical illusion, but it's still cool. But the town embraces weird there. So, the school is called Spook Hill Elementary. Casper the Friendly Ghost is their mascot. I mean, how cool is that, right? But
that's cool.
About 5 miles from there is Bach Tower, which is also called Iron Mountain, which, for Florida as a mountain, it's a whole whopping 223 feet above sea level. Not exactly a giant mountain, but people say it's the highest point in Florida. Well, as long as you don't count some of the places in the Panhandle, it is definitely the biggest on the peninsula. And it was apparently a meteor hit there in ancient times and raised it up. That's why it's got some weird properties and stuff like that.
Nice.
But this guy bought it, Andrew Bach, and he built this big bell tower right on top of it. And then he made a big garden around it, and he dedicated it to Florida. It was his new home. He loved it. But all around it is orange fields for miles. So, it's flat Florida. So it's a great place to go up and look out over everything. So again, I was running my haunted house, and we had a section on my haunted house. This is where I started collecting the stories. Was on my haunted house website, you could send me your stories. I was like, please send me your ghost stories, because I'd rather have the skunk ape jump out at you instead of a werewolf. I wanted more Florida monsters and more Florida stories. And this little old lady sent me an email, and this will give you a set of the time. That website was a GeoCities website, and my email was an AOL address, so that'll tell you how old this was for you internet chronologists. But the email I got from this little lady said she lived in the shadow of Bach Tower in the 40s, and she was on one of those orange farms, and they had a strange encounter that something was stealing their fruit. So they put up traps thinking it was fruit rats, or it might have been somebody, disreputable. And what they caught was, in her description, a small man, no bigger than a foot tall, covered in hair and naked, and screaming at him in a language they couldn't understand. They caught him in a rat trap. So they called the police, and the police came out and said, well, obviously this isn't the guy stealing your fruit, and they did know circus performers because Ringling was down here, wintering, and, Gibsonton was a whole town full of circus folk, and Tom Thumb was over in St. Augustine with Ripley's. So they were all moving to Florida at that time. So, maybe he's just a circus guy. So they let him go, but then they still set up more traps. And then a couple days later, they caught him again. And this time they caught him with an orange. So they called the cops again. And this time the cops were like, okay, we'll take him in. We'll question him. And they couldn't put handcuffs on him. So they put him in an orange crate. I love the visual of that, putting him in an orange crate and taking him in. And that's when all hell breaks loose. Suddenly, as soon as they leave, oranges are flying at the house, rocks are flying at the house, tree branches are flying at the house. All hell is breaking loose. They don't know what to do.
Nice.
Wow.
So they call the cops back, and the cops come, and they're like, at this point, it's been a couple hours. They've been unable to translate anything this guy says. They let him loose because they think they see dozens of these little guys running around in the woods, things throwing stuff. And the cops leave. Like, we're done, we're out. And she said that one of the farmhands told them that they were fairy folk and that they were red caps and that they needed to send to Ireland for a blessed rock that would protect their farmland. And so they did. And once they got the rock, they never had any problems again. And now I didn't think much of that. I thought it was a cool story. And I threw gnomes into our haunted house every year. People are like, why are you putting the gnome in the haunted house? I'm like, it's a story. I got to do it. But then the haunted house got shut down. We started doing the Eerie, Florida books. And I'm like, I need to revisit this. And of course, she had passed away in that time. And I'm like, well, I guess I can't revisit this because no one's going to remember this. But
yeah, Darby O'Gill and the Little People. That's right.
Exactly. But I had an advantage at this point. Now social media was around. So I reached out on early Facebook on a You Grew Up Here When group. And I found You Grew Up in Lake Wales When group. And I said, hey, anybody remember a weird thing about capturing a small, police arresting a small man in the 1940s? I didn't go into much detail. And a civilian worker from the police department remembered it in detail. Remembered them bringing him in the orange crate, and remembered them trying to find a Portuguese translator on the phone. They tried to get a Spanish translator on the phone, and none of them understood what the guy was saying. And she remembered him just taking him away. And there was a report, but we're still trying to find it because it's a 1940s report. And, and the nice thing is Lake Wales Police Department really wants to find this report because they love crazy stuff there. I told you, like that Spook Hill and all that. They'd love to be the home of the gnome, and all that. So they are still digging. They have found a report of a diminutive man arrested 1947, but no further entry other than that. So we want to try to get more details. And did they thumbprint the guy? Who knows? It's fun. At least we got that. So I was able to print it.
I definitely believe there are little people. I've seen little cloaked weird ones standing around a black box and always trip out about what the black box was or what it is. I still don't know. But I know I had an author, and I can't remember his name right now. The book is Iroquois Supernatural. As a native guy, and he told stories about them, little people coming up and trading with them during the corn harvest and weird stuff. Like he told it like with such confidence that it was like 100% true, and he believed it. Which it could be true. I wasn't there, so I don't know. And I've seen weird stuff, so not denying it by any means.
No, and it's we've got reports of the Cherokee went to war with the Moon-Eyed people, which were supposedly blue-eyed, fair-haired little people that they went to war with and chased them into the caves and wiped them out. So
there's something to it. And every belief system from Norse to Native to, they have these little people. So it's in the fairy stuff and all that.
Yep.
So there's something to it. The one I wanted to ask you about for sure, because it reminds me of a Creep Show episode, Tamaka Park's flesh-eating cloud Daytona. What in the world is that?
Okay, this is a native legend, but also backed up with a modern urban legend cryptid type thing. So Chief Tomoki was of near, which is now Tomoka Springs. He was a native leader at the time with several neighboring tribes, and one of our fun conquistadors came into Florida, destroying everything. And this is Hernando de Soto, and he comes up to this area, and he's looking for gold. Right? They're convinced they found gold in South America. There's got to be gold in Florida, and there's supposedly pyramids out here. There's supposed to be all these crazy things. And Tomoki is trying to impress him and says, well, we have this cup, this golden cup. And if you we drink from it before our battles, and it makes my men impervious. And now DeSoto's thinking, oh, the Holy Grail, or something like that. That's what he's been looking for. He's like, oh, I'll put old Ponce de Leon to shame. I've found a cup that makes men impervious. So let me see this cup. And he's like, well, we can't use it unless we have permission from the medicine man. And we only use it for battle. And he's like, well, show this to me. Show this to me. And finally, Tomoki's like, all right, I'll get it. I'll get it. And he brings it. And he's like, well, drink from it. He's like, well, we haven't done the ceremonies. We haven't done this. We haven't done that. And then he's like, fine, I will, and then DeSoto decides to attack because he sees the gold. He's like, all right, we've got it. This is at least a chunk of gold. And Tomoki dips it into the springs, downs it, becomes immortal, and he fights them off. But the problem is now DeSoto is sending for reinforcements. The natives are screwed. The shaman and all the other tribes are furious because you've let loose the secret. And so they're going to war with him as well. So Tomoki is flipping out. And so he goes back to the well and just keeps drinking it so that he'll survive the upcoming battles. But it just disintegrates him. It turns him into this pink sludge that slinks into the sacred springs and taints it, so it'll never be able to make people impervious and immortal again. So he cursed the springs. Now what's interesting is that's the native legend. It turned into a pink pile of sludge or a pink cloud. And there's a big statue there of him drinking from the fountain. And, that's this big native, sculpture. Now that was actually made in the 1930s. It's not an actual native sculpture, but it's impressive. Florida tourist attractions, we were starting. But hunters in the area in the 1950s say they were tracking some wild boar. Again, one of our presents from the Spanish, that they brought all the boar over here and let them loose. Talking about invasive species. And then they get out there and they're tracking one, and it's a big one. And as it gets close to the springs, this pink cloud comes out and grabs it and disintegrates it. So there's nothing left but bone. And they're like, oh, we better not touch that. So they report it to the park ranger. The park ranger writes it down saying, maybe something's wrong. So he calls the government. The government comes out to look for chemicals or something unusual in the air. And they find more desiccated, just nothing but bones left in that area, but they don't mark it down or anything. And then again, 1970s, another group of hunters have no history of any of this, don't know any of this story. They say a pink cloud came and ate one of their friends and disintegrated him, and he drowned in a swamp. Never found his body. But they say this pink cloud ate him. So nobody was arrested. And they never found the body. So, but they said it was in that same area.
There's a national park too.
Yep, Mocha Springs National
Reminds me
Park.
of missing 411 stuff. That stuff makes me paranoid as it is, but it could be those things eating people in parks.
And people always say, how can Florida be so weird that you got 3 books of craziness? All I hear about is theme parks and beaches. And I'm like, the best thing to do for Florida is look at it from space at night. We're the Space Coast, right? All the ships launch from here. So you go up and you look down at Florida as they're flying up. They always have that camera looking back. And if you look at it at night, it's the best view. You see all the bright lights of the beaches. Like almost all the beaches are lit up, except for that forgotten coast, the big bend in the middle of the Panhandle. There's not a lot there, but because it's not the pretty beaches, and it gets hit by a lot of hurricanes. But but you see all those big bright lights. Then you see off the beaches the really big bright lights, and that's the major cities that support the beaches: the Jacksonvilles, the Daytonas, the Miamis, the Fort Lauderdales, the St. Pete, Key West, all that. They're supporting all that. And then, the Pensacola's. And then you go a little further inland and it's a little darker, but you still got all the suburbs, the sprawl, the urban sprawl. And then you got the big heart in the middle, which is Orlando, which is, of course, all the theme parks. Of course, that's super bright. But then you've got the rest is all dark with little bits of light. And that's, the Everglades to the south. You got Mayaca State Forest, which is one of the largest state forests. You got Lake Okeechobee. You got the Ocala National Forest, which is one of the largest state forests in the country. You've got the Green Swamp, which is where our aquifer is, and that's where all the water comes from. And then up in the Panhandle, you've got Tate's Hell, which, great name for a state forest, and Apalachicola State Forest, all that. And all these places are just pitch black. And that's where all the people go missing. That's where all the weird stuff happens, and all these weird things go on. And Ocala National Forest, I think, has more Bigfoot sightings now than most of the Pacific Northwest. Mayaca is where they spotted that big silverback thing years ago. Somebody took a picture of it, an anonymous photo from a little old lady. That area, Stacy Brown that's his stomping grounds. He loves hunting there. And that, so like I said, that's why there's just so much. It's crazy.
I heard a rumor, and I know it was from Stacy Brown and someone that knew him, but some secret place is kind of like Skinwalker Ranch up here somewhere in the Panhandle of Florida.
There's 3 that if I was allowed to publish the stuff that's come out of these places, because like I said, I am the creepy Florida guy. So I'm on Coast to Coast AM, I'm on Discovery Channel, I'm on a bunch of stuff. So whenever somebody has something weird happen, they call me or email me and say, Mark, I saw this thing, can you help me? And one of the places, the one is crazy for me is there's one in Ocala. I wish we could go public with the stuff we found there. It's where Ocala's big horse area. And this is a horse farm, where they raise and train $1 million horses. So, and people come from all over the world to train at this center. Like some of the Olympic people that were training for the last Olympics for equestrian trained here. And they were calling me because they were having basically poltergeist-like activity. And they were like, this is weird. And they got weird stuff on their security cameras. They got weird stuff all over. And the people who were coming to train were complaining because weird noises and all this other stuff. And they had to keep spilling it. So I finally got a paranormal team that was willing to investigate, as long as we don't publish. Yeah. But while they were there, while the paranormal team was there, they found Bigfoot tracks outside. And so they called me, and I got a Bigfoot team out there to help them. And so the 2 teams were working together, and now there's more layers of this. We're talking portals, we're talking all kinds of high strangeness, and we can't say a word.
Why won't they let you? They just don't want it out.
They don't want it out there because it would kill their business. They're so afraid because if, some of these people, especially overseas, they get most of their clientele from overseas, and overseas isn't as open to this. I mean, as little as we are too. But the fact, they all make fun of our
Yeah.
television channel showing ghost adventures.
That's why Skinwalker Ranch and Bigelow get on my nerves, because I know Jacques Vallée, that French ufologist, cool dude. I like his books. Who doesn't? But he went there, and we don't know crap. They won't tell us.
They won't.
Makes me so pissed.
Yeah, this is one of those. Oh my God! I wish I could say more.
I understand.
But I can. I'm hoping at some point we're allowed to publish it anonymously, just not give the exact location, but
let us know,
show the evidence and stuff. Because there's like stuff appearing on walls that looks like Native American tribal stuff that just appears overnight on security camera. This is some crazy stuff. Now the one up in the Panhandle is another one. It's private property. It's another, it's an old ghost town that was an old turpentine mill and an old carpenter's sawmill there too. Not too far from where the Rosewood Massacre happened, which is another fun, dark historical piece of Florida history that was hidden for years. But this is another area where a native tribe was wiped out, and now it's got all kinds of strange occurrences. Again, Bigfoot, UFO, ghost, all three, all over this place. And again, I can't say much about it other than it's there, and that it's in the Panhandle and near a town that rhymes with Schmainsville. So,
Gotcha.
So it could be almost anywhere.
Yeah, around here. Here's something I heard out of I don't really like exopolitics. A lot of them seem like they could be writing like soft porn fiction on Amazon for Bigfoot or something, some of the weird stuff. But I saw this on Michael Sala's, and I don't know him from Adam, so I don't know the guy. But exopolitics, there's certain personalities in there I just don't like. But I saw this story, and I'm just curious if you ever heard anything about it. It could be BS that's out of exopolitics, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But I didn't watch the interviews. I just saw the titles and read the description about it. And I wish listed it was going to come back. I never did. But supposedly he's telling this story lately about this military guy that met with ant people in Florida and a king of like ant people, subterranean. And they gave him a tree that's like the tree of life, like this weird story. And he keeps having like a lot of videos, and I haven't listened to them, but I kept seeing them. But of course, like I said about exopolitics,
yeah.
but have you heard anything about ant people in Florida?
Somebody forwarded that to me too, but that's the only place I've seen it. That's between them and Backpacker Verse. You want to talk about bunny trails and if you get anything from Backpacker Verse, that's the other one that's like, okay, take that with a grain of salt. It's they're an entertainment site. So it's what do in Appalachia. We go to these haunted locations and they're all talking about, all right, so this is where Ghost Adventures found their ghost, but our ghost is actually over here. So it's, I try to explain that to people. Television is television. It's there for entertainment.
My experience with exopolitics, I question the Obama time traveler Mars story with Visago and Weber, and I got called a dark cabal Satanist just because.
Of course,
I was
that's I'm working for the Men in Black because I wrote about them. So it's and because I mentioned Indrid Cold was in Florida, I must be a Men in Black, disinformation guy, and I'm like, I can't say. Like I said, there are some things I'm not allowed to talk about, but that's just because these people came to me in faith and wanted help, and I'm helping them, and that's but I'm not an investigator. I am not a Bigfoot hunter. I am not a UFO hunter. I am an enthusiast. I am a journalist. So I like to, bring light to these things. And I'm also a folklorist. I love folklore. So I want to keep these stories alive. But I reach out to Bigfoot hunting teams, UFO hunting teams, ghost hunting teams. They're all friends. And and when I first started this, the Bigfoot hunters would not talk to the ghost hunters. The ghost hunters would not talk to the UFO hunters. The UFO hunters wouldn't talk to anybody except UFO hunters. That was the way it was. And now, though, we're starting to realize these things connect. They intersect a lot more. Now that they're willing to talk a little more, we're starting to realize, okay, maybe the reason the footprints stop for the Bigfoot is maybe there's some spectral activity or interdimensional activity. And, now we're also, again, science is catching us, and quantum theory, we're realizing quantum entanglement is real, and so maybe, and time is cyclical, so maybe Bigfoot, Sasquatch is a caveman ghost or
What if
something
there's
lost in
I
time.
say that all the time about the caveman ghost. What if it's this dead Bigfoot and they are astral because they're dead?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Ron Moorhead, quantum Bigfoot. I've had Bigfoot people threaten to come to my house and beat me up because I said Bigfoot was paranormal in some of those groups before.
Yeah, that's why I always say preternatural stuff we don't understand. I mean, even Tesla and Alexander Graham Bell, Edison, when they were all in the early days of inventing things, they started inventing the phone, and there's voices on the line. Well, who were those voices? They thought it was the dead, so they were trying to invent devices to talk to the dead. They all died before they finished them. But that, even back then, they were working on it. The problem is now, you talk about, let's build a device to talk to the dead. Everybody's laughs at you. You're crazy. I'm not a big fan of.
Jay's tired. He works at Home Depot, so.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of those voice boxes or my phone app that can talk to voices, or or the Xbox Kinect camera that that's built for video games, and if I ran a video game store for 20 years, I know how terrible those things actually work. So that's the stuff. That's television. But I'd love serious money thrown into this and real science thrown behind this stuff. But we're still a ways out. But the fact that, like I said, we have Congress investigating UFOs, maybe we'll start getting some money into ghosts and some money into, actually do a real search for Champ or Big, or Loch Ness and all that. So
yeah, definitely. And we're physical now. When we croak, we're probably ethereal or astral. So it makes sense if a Bigfoot croaks. It could be spirits on some level. It could be both physical and spiritual.
Well, I mean, also could be that they do ritual like us. Maybe they bury their dead, so they don't leave. They leave no trace behind.
Yeah,
we don't know that. And other studies also show that creatures as big as that can decompose in a matter of 7 days. So even if they leave a body behind, it's within a week to 10 days, nothing's left but a few pieces of bone, and you may not recognize them as Bigfoot just by walking by them. So. It's not that easy to detect, but I agree that there should be some very serious research in all of those respects. The ghost stuff, I mean, some of the EVP stuff that I've heard about ghosts, I mean, that's enough evidence right there to get a conviction without a dead body. It really is.
Yep. There are people on death row with less evidence.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no murder weapon or no body. Yeah, there's all kinds of mistakes up there. It's unbelievable.
What do you think about some of the missing 411 stuff? I've interviewed David 4 or 5 times in the past, written and on the radio. It's been a while. But what do you think some of that is? You think it's a smorgasbord of things, or do you think anything in particular? They seem to want to pin it on Bigfoot sometimes. I don't know. Some of them maybe, but certainly not all of them are snatching folks.
Yeah, it's definitely it's one of those. David's great, and the fact that he brought so much of that attention to all that, that's one of the reasons why he's so great. National treasure, and I hope nothing ever happens to him. Him and Nick Pope are some of my favorite people, and Nick Redfern definitely. But it's one of those. I think it's many things. I think, like I said, it's stuff we don't understand. It's some of it is just people go missing. I mean, walk out in those Everglades, you could go missing very quickly if you don't, track where you're at. Like I said, going into the Appalachian Mountains, I went into a valley I probably shouldn't have, and a lady chasing me with a shotgun. So that if I hadn't gotten back to my car as quick as I did, I might not be here right now, and people would be writing, "What happened to Mark Muncy, the famous monster hunter?" And I'm like, or infamous, whatever, depending on who's talking about me. It's one of those. I realized I was a heartbeat away from being on Missing 411. But our supernatural things, preternatural things, doing this stuff, possibly. Some of them, I think, are things that we don't understand. I think some people have been taken from where we are, and did they walk into a portal into another realm? Did they upset a Bigfoot? Did they, or did they just stumble on a meth dealer, or even a shine still? The fact that there's still shine runners in this day and age is makes me laugh.
There actually are still moonshiners running shine up and down, particularly in the Appalachian areas. Yes.
One of the stories in Eerie Appalachia is a Shine family contacted me because they had a weird experience. They were trying to improve their shine because business was slow, so they got out grandma's cookbook looking for some medicinal, options. What they didn't realize is grandma's medicinal book was actually a spells and hexes book. And so the things she was telling them to put in were, not exactly of this world. And so they mixed it in, and it was working great. They were all feeling really good. So they had a big party. Everybody's drinking it up. All, the neighboring families are all coming. And they start seeing things out of the corners of their eyes, just shadows moving and little things just darting around. And they start to panic. That paranoia kicks in, right? And they're like, "Oh God, it's rats! They're trying to get into our corn and getting into the potatoes and getting into all the things that we need to make the shrine." So they start grabbing the guns, and the next thing you know, there's shots being fired, and these things are running around crazy, and they start looking at them and they realize they're kind of balls of oily slime. The one guy described it as it looked like venom from Spider-Man's head, with just all teeth rolling around. And one of them tries to catch one in a sack, like a potato sack. He's got it. And as he's trying to get it around it, he starts screaming. It bites, and there's like blood's coming out of his hand. So, and now everybody starts panicking. Everybody starts running. And that's the end of it. But, the police show up the next day and bust everybody because, oh my God, it's an illegal shine thing. And the dude's bleeding out of his hand. They're like crazy. So, but the one little budding chemist, the guy who invented all this, and made that mix, he's convinced that these were not something that they summoned. This is not just some strange hallucination, group hallucination. He thinks those things are always there. And this shine concoction opened up the third eye so you can see them, but it also let them see you. And so, that's mind-blowing when you hear about it. But what was funny was literally 2 weeks as I was about to go to press with that story for the book, he calls me, they were back in business and doing some more shine, wanted to know if I wanted a batch. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm good. I'm epileptic. I don't need alcohol, so it's good.
So we got like 5 minutes, but one thing I wanted to ask you real quick, just maybe you can give a summary. What was these mermaids in Weeki Wachee? Was those real mermaids? I don't hear about Florida mermaids.
That was a tourist attraction that they basically, it's an underground spring. Again, we don't know how deep it goes. No one's ever been able to get to the bottom of it because the current is too strong. It is a freshwater spring. The whole town no longer exists. Weeki Wachee folded just a few years ago. There was only like a dozen residents. It was an underground theater that you could go watch these women swim around in, and they would use breathing tubes, so they weren't wearing tanks or anything like that. And they train these Olympic divers to do this stuff. One of the famous mermaids was a guy named Riku Browning. He was the merman. He later went on to do the creature from the Black Lagoon. Nice. He was the underwater guy in the suit. That's why he could do all that stuff. They filmed that in Silver Springs and some in Weeki Wachee. Now, they supposedly saw a mermaid off the coast of St. Pete. But when it was found, it was actually a hoax. But it's one of those, people always talk about the mermaids of Florida. Of course, the classic is, the manatees are the mermaids. And if you confuse the manatee for a mermaid, you were very mistaken. But yeah, so, it was just one of those, we had to write about them because everybody expected mermaids in the book. So
Definitely. Well, thanks so much. It's been great. I've enjoyed it a lot. I love this stuff, and you are a master of it. So I definitely appreciate it. It's amazing.
My pleasure. And if anybody wants to know more, just visit us at eerietravels.com. That links to all our books, and You can order direct from us, and my lovely wife will draw a monster in it for you if you order from us. But you can find our books in any Walgreens or Cracker Barrel in Florida, and you're famous when you're in Cracker Barrel. And you can also find us on all the usual books places too.
That's what happened. You'd been on my friends list, and I'd been meaning to interview, but never just kind of got around to it. But I'd had COVID and flu crap in December. Me and Christina went to CVS, and there was a Creepy Florida on one of the little cylinders in the store, and I picked it up. It's like, I've heard of them, and then here we are. So good synchronicity.
That's how it works, man. I always tell everybody, if you see one in a CVS or a Walgreens, I'll pay you $1 if you move it to the top shelf so everybody can see it better. So.
It was there, definitely. Well, we appreciate it so much. We'll definitely have to get you on again. It's been great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Have fun. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Take care. Jay's going on for 3 hours about Trumpagooch.
Oh, I don't know what we're going to talk about, but he may come up.
We're still on air, so be careful.
He comes up once in a while,
Do you get a PP tape?
No, we get more. We go on more about Biden at the moment because he's just a little more scary.
Everything.
He's the one that's in charge.
They both suck crap. Both parties suck crap. Our government sucks crap. But that's why I can't do politics, because I don't like any of them. Like I just would like to do Mad Max and put both of them in a cage match with their weapon of choice at this point, so they'll shut up. And with their dumb
that would be tribalism. You're talking then,
their
right?
dumb tribalism back and forth. Oh, left versus right. Oh, it's just so boring. Like, I just want to throw up. But to each their own. I'm more of a. That's what I get mad at before it's news. They like to put up all this politics stuff all the time and highlight it and put UFO stuff in the alt, whatever, the other section that is not as popular. And I'm like, this stuff's more important than your dumb politics wanker fest. Like, what happens to you after you die and interstellar objects coming into your atmosphere and the journey of the soul is much more important than Republicans and Democrats. And just hate it. But anyway, I hope everyone has a great weekend. That was a great show. I love when you get to hear all those different kind of, weird stories. And we got to get into some Florida.
Strange monsters I didn't even heard of before.
Yeah, the gas cloud.
The gas? Well, actually, I had the hemorrhagic clouds I've heard of before. They're been in Star Trek, but that's the first, real witness one I've heard of.
What fascinates me about him is he knows these secret locations of all these skinwalker ranches down here in Florida. That's pretty fascinating for sure. But everybody have a good weekend. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Good night, everybody. Have a great one. Good night. Good luck on your show, your Trumpagooch Biden show. I'm curious about that shot down object over Alaska. You hear that? That's crazy.
I heard about that.
That's crazy for sure.
Yeah, just briefly heard about that.
Hopefully we'll see you next time and we're not nuclear obliviated.
Yeah, I hope not. Yeah.
At this point, it's like, get it over with. So shut up or just do it. Good night, everybody.